In the stillness of a remote wildlife sanctuary, two newborn lion cubs let out barely audible cries, tiny, helpless, and starving. Their mother, Kiara, once a survivor of brutal poachers, sat frozen nearby, but never moved. No warmth, no milk, no bond, just silence. For 3 long days, caretakers prayed she'd awaken as a mother. But Kiara, broken by her past, simply couldn't. And with every hour, the cubs inched closer to death. The staff finally intervened, lifting their fragile bodies with trembling hands. But what do you do when nature itself gives up on its own? When even milk isn't enough to replace a mother's touch? Who or what can? In a quiet corner of South Africa, the sun began to rise over a place called White Lion Sanctuary, a patch of land filled with second chances. Birds chirped, the wind whispered through the grass, and somewhere in the far corner of the sanctuary, a miracle had just occurred. Kiara, a beautiful but emotionally wounded lioness, had given birth to her first litter, 2 fragile cubs, a brother and sister. At first glance, it should have been a joyful scene. New life, soft roars, gentle licks. But that wasn't what happened. The sanctuary's caretakers stood at a distance, silent, hopeful, but also deeply worried. Kiara wasn't moving, not toward the cubs, not away from them. She just lay there, breathing quietly, eyes wide open, staring at the world as if she didn't recognize it. The cubs wiggled closer to her, their tiny bodies pressing into her belly, instinctively searching for warmth, for comfort, for milk. But Kiara didn't respond, not a lick, not a nudge, not even a glance. And as each minute passed, the staff began to realize they weren't watching a mother bond with her babies. They were watching her shut down completely. To understand Kiara, you'd have to go back a year. She wasn't born here. She was rescued. Before arriving at White Lion, she had been trapped in the wild, injured by poachers who wanted her hide, her teeth, her life. She survived, yes, but her trust in the world didn't. The sanctuary gave her space, love, food, safety. But deep inside, she was still carrying scars no medicine could treat. Now, faced with motherhood, Kiara didn't react the way most lionesses do. She didn't cuddle, she didn't groom, she didn't feed. Her body had given birth, but her heart hadn't followed. The caretakers gave her time. One day, then another, then another. For 3 full days they waited. They stayed quiet. They watched from behind trees and enclosures, hoping for a spark. Any sign that Kiara would turn her head and acknowledge the tiny lives beside her. But all they got was silence. Meanwhile, the cubs were growing weaker. Their cries, soft at first, turned into faint gasps. Their movements slowed. Their fur, once fuzzy and golden, began to look dull. And then came the moment every rescuer dreads, the moment when hope is no longer an option. On the 3rd night, one of the vets said in a whisper, "If we wait any longer, we'll lose them both." So the next morning, just as the sun began to touch the treetops, the staff stepped in. A team of 2 vets and 1 caretaker walked slowly toward the den. Kiara didn't attack. She didn't even growl. She just stepped aside, not with aggression, not with fear, but almost with surrender, as if she already knew she wasn't meant for this role. The cubs were gently lifted, 1 in each arm, wrapped in soft cloths. They were so light, so quiet. One of them, the little girl, didn't even open her eyes. The boy blinked, confused, then let out a tiny whimper, the kind of sound that would shatter your heart if you were close enough to hear it. A bottle of warm milk was waiting nearby. The vets tried to feed them, a few drops at first, then a few more. They sucked slowly, carefully, as if they weren't quite sure what was happening. It was a relief to see them take in something. But the staff knew the truth. This was just the beginning of a much harder journey. Because milk wasn't the only thing cubs needed. Without a mother's warmth, they wouldn't know how to regulate their body temperature. Without her licking, they could develop skin infections or fungal diseases. Without her daily nudges, their bones wouldn't grow as strong. Their instincts wouldn't form naturally. In the wild, lion cubs don't just survive on food. They survive on love, touch, protection. And these 2 had been born into the world without any of it. The sanctuary team worked in shifts. Every few hours someone would hold them, clean them, feed them. But even with all the care in the world, they knew something was missing, something no human could give. The cubs weren't just hungry, they were lonely. By day 4, the cubs looked better, yes, but their eyes still searched for something else, something familiar. a heartbeat they could curl up against, a figure they could follow. That's when someone from the staff remembered something unusual. A nearby family had a German shepherd. Her name was Gerda. She had just given birth to one puppy, a surprise for the family, but a blessing nonetheless. Her body was still full of milk, and Gerda, well, she had always been kind, caring, gentle, the kind of dog who'd mother a stuffed toy if you left it beside her long enough. A phone call was made. The family didn't hesitate. Gerda arrived the very next morning. She was alert, curious, tail low but not tucked. The cubs were placed gently in a small, hay-lined enclosure, while Gerda stood just outside. For a moment there was only silence. The staff watched, tense, hopeful. Nobody moved. Then it happened. Gerda stepped in. She sniffed the cubs once, twice, and then, without warning, she lay down, right beside them. Her body curved protectively. The cubs, sensing something warm and alive, wriggled close. They sniffed, they rooted around, and then one latched on, then the other. They were feeding. Everyone watching let out a sigh, some even cried, because they weren't just seeing survival. They were witnessing something rare, something powerful. One species reaching across instinct and difference to save another. And Kiara? She watched from a distance, her golden eyes reflecting the scene, but not interfering. Maybe she understood, maybe she didn't, but in that moment, the roles had shifted. The lioness had stepped back, and the dog had stepped forward. The cubs had found a new mother, one with a different shape, a different scent, but the same beating heart of love. And what happened in the days that followed would surprise even the most hardened skeptics. But that part of the story, what Gerda did, how the cubs grew, and what happened 2 years later when they reunited, is something you'll never forget. But for now, in this quiet corner of the world, a motherless beginning had found its first heartbeat of hope. It was pure magic. In that instant, grief and fear melted into something else, hope. The sanctuary team cried, unashamed. The moment was fragile. One wrong move could break the spell, but it held. Gerda had chosen to love, to nurture, to protect. Over the next days and weeks, she embraced her role. Every morning, she lay with the cubs, grooming them gently with her tongue. She nudged them awake for bottle feeding when her milk slowed. She kept them close at night, body heat radiating through their tiny bodies. The cubs responded in kind. They followed her, napped near her legs, learned to nuzzle and wrestle with her like pups. She taught them routines, where to sleep, when to nap, how to chase a stick, and she did it with the patience of a seasoned mother. Meanwhile, the sanctuary staff marveled. "Look how she tucks them under her," one keeper whispered. "She guards them like they're her own puppies," another said. Every scene was heart-wrenching and heartwarming at once, a dog mother raising lion cubs. By the end of week 1, the cubs had tripled in weight. Their eyes sparkled with life. They played rambunctiously, chasing each other in circles around Gerda. She watched them with a gentle gaze, tail wagging softly. And then they began to test limits. One cub tugged at her ear like a toy, another nipped at her nose. Gerda barely flinched. She tolerated it all with motherly grace, guiding them away with calm nudges. Soon, tiny play sessions turned into wrestling matches. The cubs learned to pounce, their tiny claws batting at her tail. Gerda would bark playfully, but not angrily. They would scamper off, then come right back, looking for comfort. Their bond grew. It was obvious when Gerda curled her body protectively around them during storms. It was clear when she sat between them and the sanctuary boundaries, as if guarding them from unseen threats. It was undeniable as her eyes tracked their every movement, alert and gentle, an unlikely but perfect mother. Time flew. Weeks stretched into months, and the cubs kept growing. Teeth sharpened, claws lengthened, muscles appeared under their golden fur. They towered over Gerda, shoulders brushing above her back. Visitors would gasp, "Look, those are lions." But there she was, Gerda, remaining calm among them. She allowed them to climb her back like rocky hills, to bite at her coat, even to knock her over. Through it all, she stayed. Always stayed. She adapted, folding her legs to make room for their weight, letting them wrestle until they tumbled off her. Sometimes she'd roll over on her back, inviting play. Sometimes she'd chase them around the enclosure, barking in excitement. The sight was enchanting. A dog chasing lions, the cubs loving it. But seasons change. And soon one harsh truth became impossible to ignore. The cubs were growing too big to live with a dog. Their claws were sharp daggers, their jaws strong enough to harm. The sanctuary team gathered in the evening light, each face filled with mixed emotions. One vet said softly, "It won't be long before their instincts make this dangerous, for all of us, including Gerda." The caretaker nodded. The cubs lounged nearby, chewing sticks, oblivious to the discussion. They were home, but not forever. Gerda lay down beside them, head on paws, as if sensing the shift. The decision was made. Gerda would return to her family home, and the cubs would move to a more suitable habitat. It was the hardest part. The staff wept as they guided Gerda gently out of the enclosure. The cubs watched, ears perked, tails still. Gerda's owner scooped her into a car. The cubs stayed behind, heads low. It felt like a breakup, like saying goodbye to a mother they didn't know they needed. But even apart, their bond remained. Gerda returned home and slept in her bed, but still carried the memory of Cubs' warmth. The cubs moved to a larger space, grass, logs, climbing structures. They were fed meat, taught to hunt fake toys, trained for health checks. They grew stronger every day. Yet every night, the staff noticed they'd pace near the gate where Gerda used to enter, their heads turning as if listening for her bark. Their eyes glistened with recognition. They were no longer the helpless, orphaned newborns. They were golden, powerful, wild. But they were also her cubs, and so they grew up as lions, but with a dog's love stitched into their hearts. The months passed. Cub 1, now a young male, claimed his place on a rock outcrop, surveying the sanctuary. Cub 2, now a sleek young lioness, shadowed him playfully, still reared beside the original dog. Staff remember how she'd trot after him, stopping only to glance back at the gate as if waiting. It was subtle, but unmistakable. And then somewhere along the way, they both began to display unusual calm around domestic dogs, never aggressive, always curious, a leftover imprint of Gerda's love. Throughout this time, caretakers captured every moment, Gerda gently licking cub fur, the cubs napping under her belly, all of them chasing butterflies together. Each video ended with audiences stunned. A dog mother to lion cubs? Comments begged, "Is this real?" Yes, it was more than real. It was love across species. 2 years had passed since that unforgettable chapter began. 2 years since a German shepherd named Gerda fed, guarded, and mothered 2 abandoned lion cubs who should never have survived. In that time, the cubs had become something extraordinary, no longer soft, clumsy, or fragile. They now stood tall and strong, with thick golden coats and eyes that gleamed with quiet power. The male, broad-chested and towering, would stretch his body across the sunlit rocks like he owned the land. His sister, sleek and fierce, followed close behind, always alert, always near. Together they ruled their enclosure like young royalty. But beneath that wild strength, something still lingered, something the staff couldn't quite explain. At night, the lions often paced near the edge of their enclosure, their eyes trained on the same corner where once upon a time a dog had walked in and changed their lives forever. That memory hadn't faded, and neither had Gerda's. Back in her quiet home with her human family, Gerda still perked up at the sound of lion roars on the television, tilting her head, tail still, as if waiting for something or someone. And then, one spring morning, the call came. The sanctuary director invited Gerda and her owner for a visit. No promises, no expectations, just one question burning quietly in everyone's mind: would they remember her? Gerda was loaded gently into the car, unaware of the moment building ahead. The road to the sanctuary wound through trees, past open fields, and into the wild heart of the reserve where it had all begun. Staff waited by the entrance. Cameras were ready, hearts pounded, not from fear but from uncertainty. What would happen when a fully grown lion and lioness came face to face with the dog who raised them? Could love outlast nature? Could memory pierce through instinct? As the car door opened, Gerda stepped out, calm, ears up, sniffing the familiar earth. Her owner gently clipped on her leash, but she pulled ahead, already sensing something. The lions were lounging near the far fence, their golden bodies catching the sunlight. The moment Gerda rounded the corner, the air shifted. One lion lifted his head. His sister stood quickly. Their eyes locked onto the figure approaching the gate. The staff watching held their breath. Cameras zoomed in. Everything went still. Then the lions began to move, slowly at first, steps deliberate, eyes locked, tension thick. No one spoke. The air was heavy with uncertainty. Gerda kept walking, tail low but steady. The lions reached the gate. They didn't roar. They didn't growl. They just stared, nostrils flaring, ears forward. One staff member whispered, "Should we stop this?" But the director raised his hand. "Wait," because what happened next didn't feel like danger. It felt like recognition. And then the male lion leaned in, his giant nose pressed softly against the metal bars. Gerda stopped, sniffed back, and with no warning, she wagged her tail. The lion let out a low chuff, not of anger but of memory. The lioness joined in, rubbing her face along the gate, as if saying, "Where have you been?" Then the male did something no one expected. He lowered his head, leaned sideways, and began to purr. That sound, a deep rumbling vibration, was a sound of affection, not aggression. The gate was slowly opened, just a little, enough for Gerda to step inside. One handler gripped the door handle, just in case. Another stood by with a tranquilizer, just in case instinct did win. Gerda stepped through. The lion stepped closer. One growl, one wrong move, and the dog could be torn apart in seconds. Everyone braced. Time froze, but the growl never came. Instead, the male lion pressed his giant head against Gerda's shoulder. The lioness curled around behind. Gerda let out a soft bark of recognition, licked the male's jaw, then turned and gently nuzzled the lioness's chest. The staff watching dropped their jaws. What they were witnessing wasn't survival, it was reunion. A reunion filled with silent understanding, gentle gestures, and invisible threads of memory that had never broken. The lions lay down beside her, not like hunters claiming prey, but like children returning home. Gerda circled once, then curled between them, her head resting on the lioness's paw. It was a pose the staff remembered, one they hadn't seen in 2 years. The sanctuary workers watching couldn't hold back their emotions. Some clutched their chests, others simply cried. The camera crew forgot to breathe, and as the sun dipped lower behind the trees, golden light painted the scene in a glow that felt unreal. Wild animals, a domestic dog, all tangled together in a bond that had somehow survived time, distance, and instinct. Later that evening, Gerda's owner knelt by the fence, eyes wide with awe. "She remembers," he whispered. "They all do." The lions, gentle giants now, nuzzled Gerda with the same care they had once received from her. They licked her face. They lay beside her, letting her small body press into their massive frames. And Gerda, old now, gray around the muzzle, wagged her tail slowly, peacefully, eyes half closed, as if everything had finally come full circle. This wasn't just a reunion, it was proof that love doesn't fade, even when wrapped in fur and fangs. That family isn't only made by blood, but by time, care, and shared warmth on cold nights. It was the ending no one dared expect, but everyone desperately hoped for. And for the millions who would one day watch this footage, one truth would echo: sometimes the most powerful mothers are the ones who are never meant to be. And the most beautiful stories are the ones we never saw coming. That day, something powerful happened, something that words can hardly describe. Everyone who watched that moment unfold, from the youngest volunteer to the sanctuary's oldest vet, stood in stunned silence. And then, tears. Not of sadness, but of deep, overwhelming joy. Because in a world where we often doubt what's real, that reunion reminded us of something simple and true. That real love doesn't care if you have paws or claws, fur or fangs. It doesn't fade with time, and it doesn't follow rules. It just stays. It finds its way back, no matter what. And there they were again, Gerda and her lions, resting side by side as if no time had passed, like family that had never been apart. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a second to hit that like button. It helps us keep sharing these powerful, true stories. And if you want to see more proof that animals can love in ways we can barely understand, hit subscribe. Because we've got more stories coming, stories that show one thing again and again: love knows no limits.